but it's totally revised here to the point where it's entirely alien. It's Earth, but it doesn't feel like Earth. Hello, welcome to Books and Booze. This is a series where I talk about books and I have some booze. I'm Alex. This time I'll be talking about Josiah Bancroft's Senlin Ascends. It is the first part of the Books of Babel series, which I am very intrigued by now. I'll also be sipping on some of this drive-through red. It's a dry hopped double L from Trader Joe's. Someone that I find my booze at repeatedly so far on this channel. We'll see what else they put out for us here. But I've already poured a little bit of it, so I'm going to keep sipping on that for now. But here we are. Cheers to Josiah Bancroft and Senlin Ascends. I also had that same beer on my Devil's video, and I think it's an excellent summer sipper, as some people call it when that more applies to whiskey. But I like amber ales, I know a lot, and this is pretty similar to that, but I don't know if it's the dry hopping. I don't know what that means really, whatever it is, but it's slightly like more sweet and less malt forward than an amber, and I don't know if that's just red ales in general or that's the dry hop, but it's a really fair price and it's really delicious, so highly recommend it. Senlin Ascends is really fascinating on a few different levels. For one, it was entirely self-published to begin with, and then was picked up by a publisher, I think, approximately like 4 to 6 years after. I could be wrong about that, though. But this 2013 fantasy, sci-fi, steampunk light novel follows Thomas Senlin, which I'm hoping I'm saying Senlin right. I'm mainly probably going to call him Tom during this. But he's the headmaster of this school out in the country of and he's going on a honeymoon with his wife, Maria, to the Tower of Babel, which is a massive structure that kind of embodies the entire world in this, let's say, alternate history. Why not? It's so massive that each section of the tower, like each level, is an entire ringdom. It's its own like kingdom. Practically, it's how massive it is. And he is very excited for his honeymoon. He has a guidebook. He's obsessed with the tower. He's never been able to visit, so he's going to go on this grand adventure with his love of his life to the Tower of Babel. And things already start to not go as planned as when they first arrived. It doesn't seem as civilized as Tom expects it to be when he first arrives. And while he's waiting with some luggage, while his wife goes off to do a little bit of shopping outside in the markets outside the tower, he loses her. And it is so chaotic that he can't find her. And there's even legends around not being able to find anyone once you lose them at the tower. So he's suddenly in dire straits. He begins his hunt for her based off some guidance and based off what he knows she would do as well. He then has to enter the tower, and his journey begins from there. To give a little bit more background on Josiah Bancroft, I think you should already have him on his radar, given this was completely self-published and then picked up by Orbit, of all publishers, later on. He's an American fantasy writer. He's known primarily for this debut and it becoming so popular and well-received through word of mouth that he bolstered up the whole series. And it's getting even more traction now. That's how I learned about it, is it keeps having kind of this renaissance around it. Other than that, there's not really much information about him as a writer. I believe he's started some other series now. I think this one's done. I'm planning to continue, so we'll see. But I think that's just a testament to how good this story is and how interesting the world is. I mean, if there's any qualms I have with this, it's just that I almost felt that like Bancroft could have heightened his language around specific themes even more. That's not to say that his prose is poor. It's absolutely not by any means. But, you know, his writing is clever, it's engaging, it's poetic. He's clearly a masterful at the craft. But at times I thought he could lean even more into kind of a drawn-out perspective around the themes of the book and kind of have even more climactic moments that land a different kind of effect. That's to say that the novel does do this. But it does it mainly through really strong character development, which I'll get into later here, I just found myself wondering, what could the prose accomplish if it walked through the essence of some of these themes? I'm thinking of something more like Dune or Between Two Fires, a fan favorite on the channel here that I think does a really good job at doing that. Those two books do. There's kind of always this balance between the prose and the character's interior monologue in those books that kind of catalyzes a lot into thematic material. This doesn't do it as much, and I think just based off some of the recommendations and expectations I've had, I thought this would do that, but it goes for a different tone altogether than those books. This is more steampunk adventure than contemplative sci-fi fantasy. It's certainly there in that realm, but I think Bancroft mainly cares about having a damn good story and having a good time doing it. One other thing is that I think the villains, this Red Hand character and some others, they could use a little bit more love. They just kind of exist as these fully corrupted individuals that engage in villainy, let's say, and I'll only keep it there for now. I would be interested in some more detail about those characters, lingering with them a little bit more, but that might happen in the other books. We will have to wait and see. That's kind of it, though, because there's a lot to love here, so let's get into it. The world of Senlin Ascends is highly fascinating. If you've followed me on the channel, you know that if there's any kind of weird biblical spiritual themes around something, I'm going to be kind of like interested in it. And the idea that this had a revision of the Tower of Babel and kind of like what that is and like it survives in this alternate history, I'm there. I'm interested. It doesn't matter. What I didn't expect was that it's kind of like steampunk in nature. I don't know if others would consider this steampunk. If you've been into steampunk literature, please let me know in the comments if you would consider it that. I do think it's kind of like steampunk light. Like a lot of the technology, a lot of the way the world functions relies on steam technology. But I don't think it leans as heavily into it from what I can tell just yet. Let me know below though if you think that's the case or not. But the idea behind the Tower of Babel here is just, it's a really interesting one. Even the sense of time is like fascinating. It's like, I don't know if there's like a set year when this is taking place in this alternate world, alternate history. Like everything is existent to our world to some degree, but it's totally revised here to the point where it's entirely alien. It's Earth, but it doesn't feel like Earth. And it's awesome to see how Bancroft is so good at developing the world that the tower itself fits into the plot and the themes that it wants to explore. For example, as Senlin gets past the undergirth of the first level, it's just like smugglers to a certain degree, just ragamuffins, people running crappy shops, and in the middle, of course, there's a steam-powered carousel in which people huff and puff, kind of almost like on like those like exercise bikes, in order to get a little bit of beer out of it and get drunk off of it. This beer is probably a little bit better than what I gathered the beer that they were drinking in that specific instance. But after he gets past that, he's then in a second ringdom that is an entirely perpetuous performance in which you play a role and you have to feed these fires, but it's setting up this idea that even beyond that ringdom, things become sort of performative in a way. And then you see that actually made manifest in the third ringdom, which is this very elegant, elaborate spas. You actually kind of see some characters embody the type of performance that was going on in the second ringdom, even though that's not explicitly shown, you can kind of pick up on it. Which is also to say that in that third ringdom, after these kind of tumultuous times in the first two, people plateau. And there's something about the space of the spas in general that are speaking to the idea that even stagnation, let's say sloth, almost to kind of a certain degree, is a way that the tower corrupts people. And that also happens through the superficial performance that you see outlined in the second ringdom. It's really interesting, and it's subtle, it's small, but it's clearly very well thought out. And what it's paired with is Bancroft's incredibly strong character writing. Tom, as a character, has excellent organic development throughout the course of this plot. And the themes, I think, what Bancroft wants the Tower of Babel to represent, this sort of overwhelming power of corruption, this sort of power of human pride and arrogance that seeps through in it's made manifest in different ways, like the performativity or the stagnation, the debauchery of the third ringdom, and the ones past it, but I won't get into too much detail there. It's also played out on Tom. He kind of is continuously taking this on, deciding almost like what he takes on and what he doesn't. It's a fascinating look at corruption, and I think the novel does a wonderful job of showing how, without spoiling much, Tom can kind of take on some corruption, use that to his advantage while still kind of keeping a noble pursuit, though I think we're seeing some cracks in that, maybe, toward the end of this novel. So there's a little heads up that Tom's going to get pretty complicated as a character, and I think that's the thing that also just drives you forward, and it's fascinating. It's just to see how he grapples with this. Or perhaps you could even make the case that it's him being bogged down about being realistic about how he has to operate in a world that's not this fantasy, idyllic land where everyone was greatly civilized and clearly just super polite and well posed based off, I don't know, human innovation and them building the tower, this amazing feat. It's not that at all. It's highly corrupted, it's devious, it's evil, and Tom has to enter that world, and maybe he just has to succumb to accepting some of it if he's just going to survive and reach his wife. And the other amazing thing is that despite Tom being so layered and interesting of a character, and watching how he traverses the tower, you get that with even side characters. They receive the exact same excellent treatment that I think Tom does, albeit we just get blips of them. I think this is especially true for the characters of Edith and Adam, who come and go over the course of this first novel, at least. And Edith is just a fascinating character, too, as she's going to have similar development to Tom, even though we don't get to see the exact events that lead to that development. And the entire time, the novel does not compromise solid pacing to develop these characters in further detail, them giving us their backstory, even Tom's flashbacks and backstories, I don't think really compromise pacing at all. Bancroft does a great job of weaving in other stories and narratives into the grand narrative. And I think something I really liked about it too is that the prose is layered yet accessible enough. It's just good storytelling that doesn't compromise at any sentence. It sort of reminds me of a video game or even like an anime in its structure. Tom goes in, there's a whole new world. He has to kind of figure out the puzzle of that ringdom to way. That's to say, he has to figure out how does one operate and survive in this kind of environment, in this kind of atmosphere. And I personally have no issue with you borrowing a storytelling structure from something like a video game or anime. We're super drawn to those things because that structure and that storytelling is so compelling to us in some way. And I think similar to maybe more so the video game side of things is like you're almost kind of invited into figuring it out with Tom. Like you kind of want to catch on to something before he does, because you're watching him work it out. And it just makes for a good time, and it's really compelling. I mean, you are sunk into it. And I want to just give an example of some of that prose that I think is really solid writing before we sign off here, and I'll keep it toward the beginning here. So read a couple of paragraphs here from it's just chapter 2, so there's nothing too crazy here, but this is right after he has lost his luggage and lost his wife, and he's just trying to figure out what to do next. Senlin sat atop a sandstone boulder at the foot of the tower, eating the pistachios he'd bought for breakfast. His chapped lips stung. Small brown birds scavenged through the shells he dropped, picking up at the flakes of germ. He didn't recognize the species. A few hours earlier, he'd bought a drink, a single ladle of water that cost as much as a dram of good brandy, back in his song. Already, he was thirsty again. He brought a little notebook to record his impressions. as any amateur anthropologist might, but he hadn't cracked it since disembarking from the train. He didn't wish to record any of this. His copy of the Everyman's Guide dangled from his open hand. An untidy bundle of women's undergarments sat at his side. He felt dizzy with exhaustion. His fingers quaked from it. If he laid back on the sun-warmed rock and closed his eyes, he would fall asleep in an instant. And he was afraid of doing just that. So you have that sense of just how accessible this story can be, but it doesn't, it doesn't feel the need to not take some time to linger on more poetic images and kind of interesting internal thoughts of the characters. Overall, it's wonderful. So I think you probably already deciphered by now that Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft, absolutely a toast of excellence. Wonderful sci-fi fantasy novel that I think is accessible and fun to a degree that really I think anyone interested in those genres, or someone that's interested in the themes of corruptibility, the corruption of the human spirit, but also the enduring power of the human spirit in the face of that corruption. I think it's absolutely well done. I plan on getting the second book in this series. I plan on continuing in this series, and let me know if you'd be interested to see with what I have to say about the second book in this series. I have no idea where the plot might go from there and what themes it might build upon and explore further. But yeah, absolutely. Cheers to Josiah Bancroft. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please let me know if you liked it by giving this a like, and that also helps others that might be interested in content like this get into their recommendation feed. Let me know what you thought about this book, if you had a similar experience reading it to me, if you kind of disagreed with any of my takeaways about its themes or about how its characters are utilized. I'd love to start a discussion about that in the comments below. If you like long-form book reviews similar to this one, please check out some of the other stuff I have on the channel. I do have some sci-fi and fantasy stuff sprinkled out throughout some literature and even some nonfiction on here. If you like analysis of cultural products in a general sense, I do sporadically put out video essays, mainly around movies. I'm currently very interested in exploring this idea of post-secularism. But again, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. But until then, I will see you in our next exploration.